Over the past year, I've been studying and analysing what it is that makes someone successful. So in this video, I'm going to go into the main traits and habits that underpin the success of those people and why those factors are so important when determining someone's success. So just a quick FYI, I'm going to be looking at success across 3 dimensions. These are financial, achievement and influence, and happiness. The reason being is that there's no point being super wealthy if you're miserable. And in my opinion, the most successful people are those who strike a good balance across all 3 of these dimensions. So let's start with financial or monetary success. And the first trait is that these people have a long-term view on the world. What I mean by this is that they possess a lot of willpower in being able to resist short-term temptation at the expense of long-term reward. And there are many studies, psychological and otherwise, that have kind of shown how this trait becomes so important. And one of the most well-known ones is the marshmallow test. In this test, they get a bunch of kids and individually give them a choice. And this choice is, would you rather have 1 marshmallow now or delay that gratification for 2 or 3 or whatever it may be marshmallows in the future? The kids who were able to delay their short-term impulse for that long-term reward tends to correlate highly with those who succeed later on in life. A good example of this is Warren Buffett, who constantly preaches the practice of patience, particularly when it comes to financial markets. He's been around for many generations, and throughout these years there's been multiple recessions and many financial difficulties. But his long-term principle was to not panic and to believe in the growth and trajectory of his assets, even if at the short term these things go down in value. One of the biggest mistakes that poor people make is believing in the idea of a get-rich-quick scheme. These things don't exist, and what they actually are is a scheme that makes other people get rich at the expense of those who believe in it. Of course, from time to time we hear about extremely lucky people like the lottery winners, and these people are such a minority and that they're such an edge case that you can't reliably apply those principles in order to get the same results. The other thing about that is that you tend to only hear from the winners, which are such a small percentage, even though the vast majority are the people who lose out in those schemes. The next trait within finance is that successful people have a very good grasp on value and how to monetize it. In order to grow a successful business or generate large sums of money, you need to be providing a decent amount of value to a community. Either you could be providing a lot of value to a small percentage of people or a small amount of value to a large percentage of people. But if you look at any business or any company that you can think of, the reason why that they're successful is because of the value that they provide. This could be value of knowledge or value of products or value of services or any kind of combination of these things and others. The other thing that financially successful people do is they have more than one income stream. And this is important for a number of reasons. The main reason is that if you put all your eggs in one basket, you risk the scenario where that one income stream crashes. Perhaps you lose your job. And in this scenario, it adds to a lot of stress to the mix, and you have no other way of recovering other than trying to get a new job, which can take time. The other reason is that you can have multiple income streams that generate passive or semi-passive income. In the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he explains how poor people work for money, but wealthy people have money work for them. And this translates into things such as investments and side hustles. Having several forms of income firstly provides you with a safety net, but it also gives you more options to explore down the line if one of those side hustles becomes successful. But most importantly, it gives you the freedom to spend the time in the way that you would want to spend it. If you have money flowing in that you don't need to work for, then it completely separates the inputs in the sense that the money that you have to work for using your time from the outputs, which is the money that you generate. The last thing in this list that extremely successful people do is they prioritize freedom over security. They're willing to take small risks in security at the potential reward of a lot of freedom in the future. The most abundant rewards don't come without cost, and that cost could be risk or time. And the fact is, most people aren't willing to take those risks. And you know these people because they always latch onto the idea of job security, a fixed and regular salary, and things like corporate benefits. If you're not willing to at least trade some of that time or some of that job security for freedom in the truest sense of the word, then it's going to be hard to motivate yourself to amass the amount of money it takes in order to get that freedom. And now we move into the achievement and influence dimension. And the first trait is successful people are willing to embrace discomfort. Successful people know that nothing comes for free, and you often have to work extremely hard to get the things that are most worthwhile or most desired. This could be in the form of time spent or intensity of input. And probably the most famous example of this is the 10,000 hour rule. This rule states that in order to become a master or true expert in anything, you need to be willing to put in at least 10,000 hours. The next two traits are psychological, and these are two of the most important or pivotal traits that determines the likelihood of someone being successful. The first of these traits is called having an internal locus of control, and what this basically means is that you believe you are the architect of your own destiny. There's a lot of evidence to show that those who become most successful believe themselves that they are the main factor that determines their success, whereas other people who have an external locus of control believe that in order to become successful, they need the right things to happen, or things need to go in a certain way, or the stars need to align perfectly in order for them to guarantee that success. Again, this comes back to the lottery example. Those who play the lottery most often generally believe that their only route to success is by luck, whereas those people with an internal locus of control genuinely believe that there is no such thing as luck, or they believe that they can create their own luck. The next trait is something that I've spoke about before in other videos, and that is having a growth mindset. You can ask every successful person and they will tell you that there's been difficulties and roadblocks and obstacles along the way. Having a growth mindset means that when you come up to one of these obstacles, it isn't a permanent one. It's one that you can overcome with some help or some knowledge, some perspective, or some training. These people see failure as an opportunity to learn and proof that they haven't yet figured everything out. Whereas people without a growth mindset, or in other words, a fixed mindset, believe that whatever circumstances they find themselves in, they are limited by and there's nothing they can do about it. The last trait within this section is divergent thinking. In Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, he points out that while IQ is great, and IQ does tend to correlate with your potential, but only up to a certain degree, and that degree is roughly around 120. So that means that if your IQ is above 120, it no longer correlates with your chances of being successful. Instead, other traits such as creativity, your social skills, and things like divergent thinking play a much larger role once you are sufficiently equipped to deal with the problems that you'll face, which is basically what IQ is. Divergent thinking is essentially your ability to think outside the box. A good example, which I've taken from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is how many different uses you can come up with for a towel. Someone with high levels of divergent thinking will be able to come up with countless examples, such as maybe using it as a blanket, or using it as a tent, or using it as a rope. But obviously this is just a contrived example to explain divergent thinking. But in reality, this same trait of divergent thinking really helps in the real world when it comes to problem solving, because those who are able to think outside the box tend to come up with the best solutions. But it also tends to correlate with creativity as well. So far we've spoke about financial or monetary success, and this brings freedom. We've also spoke about achievement and influence, and this brings fame and status. But now we're going to talk about happiness, and this is what brings contentment. The first trait that happy people do, or the most successful happy people do, is that they enjoy the process or enjoy what they do on a daily basis. We probably all know someone who works very hard, earns a ton of money, but doesn't enjoy their job. Really, when it comes down to it, what's the point of having all that money if the luxuries that wealth affords you doesn't make you happy? The paradox of the pursuit of happiness is that people pursue wealth in their careers in order to make themselves happy, but in reality, what tends to happen for a lot of people is that they keep pursuing it even when they earn enough money to make them happy. They then trade their happiness for money, which is the very thing that they're trying to buy happiness with. So this is why it's a paradox. The next trait of extremely happy people is they don't play status games. Status games are when you use any of your assets, whether they're physical or financial, in order to show off or get one up on someone, or present yourself in a way that elevates you above most other people. One of the best examples here is the idea of keeping up with the Joneses. And that is, you're always trying to compete with your peers in order to either match or exceed them in whatever it may be. Usually this is monetary or status based. The next habit or thing that very happy people do is they surround themselves with positive and inspirational people. Personally, I believe that we're a product of our environment, and there's even research to show that if you get the 8 or the 10 people who are most close to you or that you see most often, if you kind of get an average across all of them, generally that fits very closely with who you are. And this applies on multiple dimensions, including your financial situation, your general overall happiness, and your views and beliefs and so on. So if you're struggling in some way in your life, I'm not implying that you should discard everyone that you know because they're making you miserable. It could be something like, or a matter of just trying to surround yourself with more positive or more upbeat people from time to time, and slowly that positivity that you kind of inherit can then seep in and affect those around you as well. There's this idea in psychology called neuroplasticity, and this is the idea that your brain is constantly being molded and shaped based on the environment around you. So if you live in a very suspenseful or fearful environment, maybe, where there's a lot of crime and terror and so on, then your brain adapts in such a way that helps shield you from that terror or trauma, but also learns to probably not trust people, always be aware of, things that could go wrong and so on. Whereas if you surround yourself in a very positive and warm environment, then generally you end up becoming more trusting, and you tend to expose yourself to some of the ideas that make those other people happy as well. It basically comes down to the idea that positive thoughts lead to positive emotions, and these emotions can turn into beliefs and habits, and then they reinforce the entire thing again. So that positive behavior reinforces itself. So the more positive you are and your surroundings and environment, the more positive you'll likely feel on a regular basis. And the last thing that makes people happy comes from the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And this habit is called Sharpen the Saw. And this basically translates to taking care of yourself. This is basically taking care of yourself physically, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, and so on. By putting the right physical, emotional, and intellectual nutrients into your body, it increases your overall well-being, and like I mentioned in the previous point, these reinforce each other as well. So the 3 pillars of health are diet, sleep, and exercise. And if any one of these are in an extremely bad state, it's hard for you to be effective, it's hard for you to be happy, it's hard for you to be productive and successful in anything. So you need to find ways of at least getting it to a baseline level. If one of these things are extremely low, bringing that up to a baseline level. These don't need to be like absolutely perfect, there's no such thing, but at least getting it to a point where, maybe if your diet and exercise is really good and you're not the best sleeper, well, at least get a certain amount of sleep and a certain level of quality of sleep. The other 2 can help you with that. And again, these things reinforce one another so that you get the most out of it. And that's it. I'm going to leave it there. Obviously, the traits that I spoke about only really scratched the surface, and there's lots of individual stuff that individual people do. But this tends to be a collection of things that across the board correlate a lot with the most successful people. So I hope you enjoyed and you got some benefit from it. Let me know if you think there's anything I've missed. But for now, I will see you in the next one.